You're welcome to the conversation on News Central Television. I am Gbenga Aborowa. This is the program that will bring you up to speed with all the political happenings on the African continent. Today on the conversation, we will be looking at the political situation in Tunisia, where the opposition party is calling for the resignation of President Saied over low voter turnout at the parliamentary elections. In South Africa, President Saied was re-elected as the leader of the African National Congress after a turbulent few weeks in which it looked like he might resign or be pushed out by his own party over an alleged corruption scandal. These are the focus for the conversation today. Do stay with us. We begin the conversation in Tunisia, where opposition figures have called for President Kais Saied's resignation after the disastrous parliamentary election in which less than 9% of voters cast ballots, according to the provisional figures announced by the President of the Electoral Commission, Farouk Boussaka. Around 800,000 voters took part in the elections out of approximately 9 million registered. The elections on Saturday were meant to replace and reshape a legislature that President Kais Saied dissolved last year. It was one of several moves he had made to consolidate his power and tackle Tunisia's protracted economic and social crisis. Many opposition parties boycotted the vote, and many voters stayed away to the election results expected in the coming days. Now, joining us live from London in the United Kingdom to discuss this and more, I have Dr. David Matsanga, African Affairs Analyst. A warm welcome to you, Dr. Matsanga, and good to see you.
Thank you very much, my dear brother. Thank you very much for inviting me. And anything to do with Africa, I'm ready to talk about it anytime, any minute, any hour, 365 days.
Great to have you, Dr. Matsanga. Now, opposition politician Ahmed Najib Chebi called the unprecedented low turnout a real earthquake that will have serious consequences. How will you describe the conduct of yesterday's parliamentary elections?
First of all, the draconian system that the president of Tunisia has used since about 2 years ago, when there was a call for him to resign, and he took over power and changed all the things, is something that Africa must not just sit and watch. A voter turnout of less than 90%, surely, out of a population of 9 million people. This is a gentleman who has stuck to power, who does not want to leave. He uses the army. And you know very well, in Tunisia, you can't rule without the army. The army has placed him in, and they have given him a mandate. But unfortunately, the people's support is eroding very fast, because if you have a voter turnout of 8.8%, that is shameful.
Dr. Matsanga, why do you think people didn't come out? I mean, 9%, like you said, is shameful. If 9% of eligible voters turn out, what do you think was responsible for such unprecedented level of voter apathy?
People are not interested. People are not interested. You know, there is something changing in Africa about dictatorship. And the people who have stayed in power, who tend to stay in power longer, they are being rejected slowly by the generations that some were born when they were in power. And one of the countries that has got quite a lot of civil society on the continent of Africa is Tunisia. You remember the first uprising?
The Arab Spring.
The Arab Spring that removed the president by then. These are some of the things that Africa should avoid. These are the things that we should discuss. These are the things that the AU should actually bring out a full chapter on governance, elections, Elections in Africa have become the centerpiece of all the troubles that Africa has. So I don't know why a man like him using the army to stay in power, you have 9%, 800,000 out of 9 million. This is historical in Africa.
Now, Dr. Matsanga, I'm glad you mentioned the problem of elections in Africa. I mean, the West wants us to democratize. So regardless of which methods we use, they will tell you that, look, the people have spoken. In Rwanda, for example, you have President Paul Kagame doing 93 to 99% of votes, winning those type of votes. I mean, it reminds me of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. You also have the gentleman that just concluded they just started a sixth term in office. I'm talking of President Obiang in Equatorial Guinea. So is this not making a mockery of democracy? And also Tunisia, that the president in a referendum almost usurped all the powers of the legislature to himself and is almost ruling by decrees. But, you know, they will tell the West that we're still a democracy. So what really can the African Union do without it looking like they're interfering in the domestic affairs of these nations?
I think time has come to begin with the last bit that you have said. Time has come for African Union to change the whole setup of African Union. It was formed of non-interference policy, which does not work today because there are so many people agitating for democracy, for good governance, for good economic policies, for good political policies, for good foreign policies. But you cannot say non-interference in the policies of another African state. You don't dictate. That time has come. African Union has to change. The second point you talked about is elections. I don't think that, to be very frank, I don't think Africa, I've told you before, if I were in power in Africa, the first thing that I would do is to educate people of the difference between elections and democracy. Because several countries in Africa hold elections, but their election, the frequency of elections does not mean there is democratic space. So in this situation, we need to educate our people whether they really know what elections are. And two, elections are sparking violence in almost every African country, everywhere. Even in your place where
there's always tension, and elections are a civil exercise. You're meant to go to the polls, choose your choice of candidates and go back to work. In England, where you are, it's not a public holiday on election day. In America, it's not also a public holiday. People go about their business. So what makes it almost a do or die affair when it comes to Africa? Why do people get apprehensive? Why do the markets react when it's time for elections?
Because most of us are ignorant about the elections. And the elections has not taken evolution. Democracy takes time to evolution must take place. England, for example, is 1,966 years since it first had elections. For us, we are only, the first country in Africa is Ghana. It's about 65 years of independence. We have not evolved democracy. We have not learned, tolerance. We don't have it. We don't know what it means by losing and by winning. Most of the African leaders, if you go in their suits on the day of announcement of elections, they don't write two speeches. They write only one speech. I've won. Yes. Even opposition in Africa, again, opposition also in Africa has a blame when it comes to turmoil after elections. There is no opposition leader in Africa who admits that they have been defeated, except in South Africa and perhaps Nigeria, where we saw good luck Jonathan going away, Mahama in Ghana going away peacefully, in Botswana, Masisi coming in peacefully, Tanzania, we saw Mama Suluhu. Kenya, we saw Dr. William Samoei Ruto going through and the opposition saying, okay, we accept what the verdict is, but we are not happy. That is a learning process, a process that we need in Africa. But I'm telling you, there is no African at the moment. Most of the Africans people are not tolerant. They don't want to hear. You have treated them very badly. Once you get out of election, they look for you. And that is where the problem is. Another point that I want to make before we lose it is the question, the culture of pointing fingers at the leaders who have overstayed. If we point too much fingers and do what we did to Mubarak, you saw what Mubarak was done, put in a keg like a dog.
In Egypt.
Yeah, in Egypt. No African leader will, no, if you do that, you think President Museveni in Kampala will leave power? No. You think Gbenga will leave power? No. You think Kagame will leave power? No. Let's have a culture of teaching ourselves that once a leader has finished power, he has done his term of office, like what we do in Britain. That's why democracy has been stable. Tony Blair lied to us that he had a dossier on Iraq, a doctored dossier, which he later on said it was doctored, it wasn't fake, but we have killed Iraq.
Zero consequences.
Yes, but in Africa, as soon as you finish elections, policemen are on your doorsteps. They want to take you up in your telephone. I don't know the maximum prison in Lagos. What you call in Lagos?
Kirikiri maximum prison.
Kirikiri, Kidkurubi, Luzira. They want to take you there quickly. So we must develop a culture of tolerance, of saying he has finished his term of office. Let's give him his respect. If there are certain things that he committed.
Now, Dr. Matsanga, back to this. Tunisia's low voter turnout in the just concluded parliamentary elections. Ahmed Najib Chebi, an opposition leader, has said an abstention rate of more than 91% shows that very, very few Tunisians support President Kais Saied's approach. Do you agree with him, and what are your thoughts for 91% of eligible voters to stay away from elections? What are its implications?
That is, if I were the president, this gentleman, just leave. You don't have support for the people of Tunisia. Just leave. People don't have, look, he's very frail. He's very frail. And he's still, you see what pains me most? African presidents, they are frail, they still want to die on the, look at him. He wants to die on the seat. Why doesn't he enjoy the few years left so that he can stand aside and watch like Nyerere did? And give an example to other leaders in the continent that when you reach a stage, you have done your time. There comes a time. Even the Bible says there is a time for rainfall, there is time for sunshine. This guy has reached a time for sunset. The sunset. The sun has set. Let him go away. He doesn't have the support. 91% of Tunisians have rejected it. But the problem, you know what? The denominator on this one, you know what it is? The denominator is France. France controls Tunisia. As long as they have a puppet whom they can use militarily, as long as they have a puppet on the African continent. And that's why you see for me, my struggle in all your programs that you call me, I keep on calling out France.
Okay.
What did we do wrong? Why are you doing this to us?
Now, these elections were different. Tunisia had a referendum in July, and they switched things a bit. So President Kais Saied said political parties are corrupt. So he encouraged individuals to run in the elections on programs intended to serve their immediate community. The result of this is that there were 1,055 self-funded candidates competing for the 161 seats. So you have a long ballot with all these people. He says the political parties are corrupt. So my question to you, Dr. Matsanga, is how receptive, because people complained about, they were confused about the system. How receptive are the people to this unique electoral contest? And does it not make it more democratic? If I feel I'm going to be a good leader, I just put my name on the ballot instead of being controlled by political parties. What do you think of this unique? What do you think of this unique method?
It is a method of merit, cheating through merit. he cheated through merit. He said you can stand on your own merit, but he chose all the cronies. Who was clearing them? The chairman of the Electoral Commission cleared all the cronies of the president. So 1,000 something, only 125 women. In fact, those who did not have the money, the cost of living in Tunisia has hiked, and the people did not have money. They don't have money for food. They don't have money for grain. Ukraine crisis has impacted Tunisia in such a way that even local bread is very expensive. So who is going to spend all his $5,000 that he's going to stand for an election? So most of the people decided, they left it. The best thing, and I think this is a good method for Africa to learn from. If a dictator, at times I tell people who go to compete with a person they don't like, the person they know will cheat the election. Why don't you stay at home? The Tunisians have shown us, stay at home.
Now, Dr. Matsanga, you said the Tunisians stayed at home because they're not happy with the president and the system. But the president of the Tunisian Electoral Commission, Farouk Bouaska, said that the reason why there was a low voter turnout rate was due to the absence of corrupt political money, unlike previous elections, describing them as pure and legitimate. He said, people stayed at home because politicians and these parties didn't give enough money, vote buying and all of that. What do you make of his statement?
One of the things that sparks or triggers violence in Africa also is the electoral commissions. The political, the commissioners themselves can trigger violence if you are not careful. Look at that gentleman. He's saying people stayed at home because the politicians were there was no corruption. So is that the election in the whole universal accepted election must raise at least 30%.
There should be a threshold, right?
Yes, a threshold. There's no threshold. You have only 800,000 people. Out of that, we don't know how many spoiled ballots are. But 800,000 people out of 9 million registered voters.
And so does it still make it democratic when, there's no threshold? There's no threshold, so you're not expected. So if 5 people vote, is that still democracy?
What democracy? Then what is democracy? Democracy is repeating ambition by ambition. You can't stand 2 of you among 900,000 or 9 million people and say we have voted. The democracy means inclusive, many ideas, many people. Although Socrates did not describe how many people can be democratic and at what time. Still, when you read the Plato Republic, it tells you that you must mobilization of, you don't mobilize yourself, you mobilize the people. So if you are mobilizing yourself and your wife, and then you call that democracy, that is not a massive democracy. You can mobilize your home, but not a nation. A nation must be mobilized by so many people, and let other people come in and give it their ideas. But in this one, the Tunisian election is a total sham. And one of the things that you must take in account is the question of the soaring prices, the transportation. People were not able to transport. I've seen the report somewhere they were not able to go to the polling station.
So cost of living is still much a priority than the elections. But I want to take you up on this, since you mentioned Plato's Republic, and we're trying to find, a Pan-African definition of democracy. Democracy, the AVDIC also talked about the principles of separation of powers, where you have the legislative arm, the executive, and the judiciary. But in the July referendum this year, President Kais Saied usurped some of the powers of parliament. So how effective will this 160-member House Parliament be in its oversight duties of the executive?
Let me tell you, I don't know what you can call. The guy took over the parliament, took over judiciary, using the military, and the military came in. Why you see a lot of people scared coming out even to vote? Because there is a military behind this guy, and who is using the military. And most of the African leaders at the moment are resorting to military tactics of using the China style of democracy, where everybody in China who is in any influential situation is a military guy. And therefore you are not talking to a normal man. You are talking to a man who is trained, who can tell you enough is enough. Now, if you look at the way the guy muzzled the judiciary, where will you resort? Where's the recourse? Where do you go for in case you have a complaint about elections? The courts are under his arms, the parliament is under him. So the only thing that is coming for Tunisia, which I see in the coming days and the weeks, are demonstrations that are going to rock that city, that capital city. And they are well-organized civil society in Tunisia, which might actually bring down the current president. And it teaches a lesson to others who stick to power, who are in power, even when they cannot perform, they cannot do the functions of the state, they cannot walk, they cannot eat properly, but they still want to be in power, to run the states in Africa. The problem squarely lies with African Union. I tell you why. We have killed African Union. That would help us to talk about democracy, to find what type of direction. Why is there voter apathy in Tunisia? Why are people not turning up? Then what is the next step? So we wait until there is a chaos, there is a crisis. Then we jump out and they say, we have banned you from coming to Addis Ababa because you have a military junta. That is not the policy that I, Dr. Matsanga, would like to advocate for. I would like to advocate for a policy of engagement, of making sure that you educate the masses of Africa that this is the type of democracy we are looking for. The type of elections. People don't understand even what elections are. Everywhere. You look in your country.
Finally, Dr. Matsanga, because we're quickly running out of time. Now, my final question to you. Opposition politicians are calling for early presidential elections and the resignation of President Kais Saied. Is he likely to do any of these two things from your experience and analysis?
They will throw him out. They are going to come to the streets. Tunisians are not a joke. And you see, once the army sees, one of the good things about the Tunisian army is that when they see that you are wrong, you get out. They don't back you.
Okay.
You know, Ben Ali was thrown out. The army. He was an army man himself, a background of the army, but he was told, we are not backing you out. He had to go and die in Saudi Arabia. This one is also on the way out. And please, mark my words, this is not the only country in Africa that is going to face an upheaval because of the bad management of elections, the bad understanding of elections and democracy. The difference between the two has not been explained to Africans. Africans don't know what elections are.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matsanga. Always a pleasure talking to you, and we do hope you enjoy your Christmas. Thank you very much.
I'll enjoy the Christmas, and I wish I had to come to Lagos. You haven't invited me.
You're always welcome. I mean, it's News Central. We have an open door policy, and we consider you as one of us.
You should give me a present for having been one of your pioneer members.
I'm sure management is considering that and looking at it. Thank you, Dr. Matsanga. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Much obliged.
Yes.